Okay. So first of all, my notes that I just want to share, I want to just say, first of all, it's been a rather intense time in my family with my granddaughter needing surgery and my mother-in-law passing away, and then my uncle passed away, and I've been flying back and forth to Chicago and most of it out of my control. And so I do apologize for the flip-flopping and time change, and I'm gonna try and settle down in the months ahead. But I appreciate your understanding and your flexibility, and I also apologize for the switching around, because it's much easier if you have a time and a day where you know it's happening, and we're all scheduling around so many things in our lives. So thank you for the understanding. Secondly, I wanted to ask Debbie Silverman, who's in Jerusalem, to comment on what's been going on in Israel with the rocket fire and the ceasefire, and Harvey's on, and he's in Netanya, a bit north of the hot spots, but yet this kind of situation impacts the whole country so significantly. And I thought it would be useful for us to have the opportunity, since we have some of our Israeli tutors on with us, to hear their perspective, and also how it might be impacting students, if not last week, but in the future, just so we all have that perspective. So if Debbie would start, and then Harvey, I would be delighted to hear from you if you have something to add.
Hi, everybody. The operation that was started last Tuesday night in the middle of the night ended on Saturday night. So it was a short operation that was called Magen V'Chetz, which is sort of a playoff on the takeoff on the holiday of Lag BaOmer, which is when it started. Lag BaOmer was on Tuesday, and basically, there were more than about 1,100 rockets during this sort of 5.5 day period that were fired on Israel, predominantly in the south. However, there were sirens in some of the central cities of Israel. So maybe if your students, don't live in the south of the country, but they do, they study there, or they have parents there or family there. The whole country was really involved this time. And fortunately, only 2 people were killed during this whole period. But a lot of people, of course, were, had PTSD. And you really didn't know where was in the country. I know a lot of people changed their, their plans to visit relatives, or, to do work things, or they switched, simchas, weddings were changed. And just on a personal note, I was going to Tel Aviv on Wednesday, and I was waiting for the bus. I live in Jerusalem, and I was waiting in the bus with, actually, I met 2, I'm originally from Chicago, and I just happened to meet 2 tourists, 2 young women from Chicago, who were also waiting to go to Tel Aviv. And all of a sudden, I saw the screens that there had been sirens in Tel Aviv and central Israel. And so I felt obligated to tell them that, what we were going into. And I have to admit, they were pretty brave. I decided, I called my kids and I said, I'm on my way to Tel Aviv, and I'm going to continue on my way to Tel Aviv. But it really, it's a real decision, where to put yourself in danger or potential danger. So maybe if I could just see by a show of hands, how many of your students actually brought it up? Okay, a number, but not all if you had a lesson. So again, my student lives in a place called Petach Tikva, and so that area was affected, but again, his family lives in Ashkelon, which had a number of sirens and rockets, shot down around that area. Most of the Israelis in general were pretty pro this operation where Israel took out a number of the senior Islamic Jihad leaders. So that's sort of a good thing that the Israeli public was behind it. The other thing, though, is we don't know how much actual quiet it's going to bring to the region, because even after the ceasefire was declared or agreed upon to start on a Saturday night at 10, and the hour right before 10 o'clock, there was again this whole barrage of rockets all over the place. And then it stopped, and we thought, things were good. But like about 2 hours or an hour and a half after the ceasefire, there was another rocket. So then Israel had to retaliate. So we're still living sort of on pins and needles. It's not 100% clear what the future is. And the other thing I just wanted to bring out was this Thursday is Jerusalem Day. And so it's the 56th anniversary of the reunification of the 6-day war, basically, in the reunification of Israel. And what happens in Jerusalem is there is a parade of, tens to hundreds of thousands of people who march through Jerusalem and go through the old city. Now, it used to be that they would go through the old city through the Jaffa Gate, which is sort of like it's not really the Jewish quarter, but it's pretty much considered the Jewish quarter. But in the last number of years, it's been going through the Muslim quarter. So there's much more of an opportunity for there to be provocations on both sides for all these marchers going through the old city. And so we're really concerned about what's going to happen. Is there going to be a new wave of rocket attacks? In fact, I just heard on the news that the police just did a run through of the possibility of that happening, and what's the response going to be. So we're all glad it's over, and we'll just have to see what happens. But it really does affect their lives. And like my student had a big test during all of this, and it was really important for him to pass. And he said he just got through it. I mean, he just in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, am I going to have to run to a bomb shelter, even in a relatively safe place like Tel Aviv? So I think it's really important just to know that, that's what we live with. That's all I have to say.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Debbie.
sure.
And Jerusalem Day starts the evening of May 18th and goes through Friday, right? So what time is the parade
No,
on
it's
Friday?
it's on Friday. It starts the night before, because there can't be a parade on a Friday.
Okay.
So it's bumped up. It's sort of bumped up a day.
Okay.
It's the night of the 17th and Thursday.
Okay. Thanks, Debbie. And Harvey, is there anything you'd like to add? We have to unmute you, Harvey.
I think there's scarcely a single thing that could be added to Debbie's description. I just want to speak about one word or two words. One is consensus and one is resilience. By the way, personally, I live in just outside Netanya on a moshav, and no, nothing reached me personally or my student who also lives in Netanya. But for 17 consecutive Shabbatot on Saturday nights, hundreds of Israelis have gone out protesting, decrying the end of democracy in Israel, the death of democracy in Israel. And I've said all of these weeks, I've said all these months and years, cooler heads will prevail. They will, they have to, there's no choice. And here came this crisis, here came this national emergency, and there was consensus and there was unification. And all of the Air Force and Army men, reservists, who said, well, we won't turn up when called. Of course they turned up. This is who we are and this is what we are. I can speak from the comfort of my house near Netanya, but I speak for what's on the news every day and every night. There is still a consensus, and there's still a spirit of unity and purpose that won't die, that can't die, and that doesn't die. And I want to thank Debbie because her description was amazing.
Thank you, Harvey. And, I have sort of kept my personal perspective about the democracy work that's going on. And I get a lot of information because I'm involved with many groups that are out there on the parapet, as we might have said, and really, really fighting, because I believe our organization is a very big tent, and I don't want anyone to be uncomfortable in the framework of our organization and our tutor community. But I did mention in a couple of my last emails that, some of your students may not be comfortable talking about what's going on. Some may want to talk about it, and everyone's coming from their own perspective and their own experiences. And I think that we should be very thoughtful and respectful of that. And so I would just be careful about, I would let your student raise some of these things. And certainly in terms of the hostilities coming from external to Israel, it's always okay to ask, are you okay? Is your family okay? Are you feeling safe? Did you have to leave your home if they're living south? And to show some empathy and understanding, because I don't live in Israel, but I've been there during rocket attacks, and it's a very disturbing experience when you are not, that's not your reality. It's disturbing for Israelis who totally know what to do and jump into action in a second, but it's a very disturbing experience and a very frightening experience. And so I think showing sensitivity to your students about, what are they okay is a really good thing to do. So Debbie and Harvey, you agree? Yes. Okay. So anyway, if people want to speak offline, if people have any concerns, feel free to reach out, because it's some of what's going on in Israel is outside of our personal experiences, and so if you feel like you need some advice or coaching, or you've heard something that's of concern to you, just reach out, okay? Because that's why we're here together. I wanted to mention a couple things that also came up over the last couple weeks that people asked me about, and I wanted to put them out to our community. And of course, then there will be time for you to bring up your questions as well. So the first question that I wanted to ask you is, one of our tutors wrote and said, my student was interested in watching TV with subtitles in English and watching videos with subtitles in Hebrew or in English, watching English videos with Hebrew subtitles. That's what, and is that advisable if you're working on learning the language? And I did some research. I sent her some thoughts, but I just wondering if any of you who both have done this now for quite some time or have professional ESL experience have perspectives on, how to coach a student, and whether you've been asked that kind of question yourselves and what kind of responses you've had. So if you can, Barry has his hand up, and then use your little, I can't see everybody. So if you use the reaction button and raise your hand, then you move to part of my screen where I'll definitely be able to see you. So go ahead, Barry.
So I have a little experience of when I lived in France many years ago and had learned French at school and a little bit of university, and I went to the movies in French, and we didn't have subtitles, and I found it was much better because it forced me to use the language, look for the language that I knew more. So I would say without subtitles is better, in my experience of just my own experience of watching French TV or French movies. I would say it was better without the experience. But also I would say, if you use the subtitles, it would be good also, but I would recommend without the subtitles from a personal point of view. It was better for me.
Barry, in French TV and movies, cinema, they unless things have changed in the last 50 years since I was there, they don't do subtitles. They do dubbing over into French.
They dub it into French, yes. So.
And in Germany they do it, and in many other European
countries they do also, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the least successful of all the methods. But so
I just find if I watch something like in French with the subtitles, I get too distracted with watching the subtitle, the English, than listening to the actual French language. So I think it might be a better idea to turn them off if you can.
Thanks, Barry. Okay, I'm going to call on Martha Lott, then Larry Frazen, and then Kira. So I'll remind you, but Martha, you go next. You just have to unmute.
Okay, there I am. I had experience teaching ESL, and I recommend to my students, and there are two of them, one I've worked with now for over 3 years. We started way back at the beginning of the pandemic, and I met with her yesterday, and the other one today. I suggest to them that they, most of them have Netflix, and they can get American movies or American TV shows. And if the more they listen to it, they know each other, my two students. They both live in Rehovot, which, by the way, was hit by a bomb. And I immediately sent a WhatsApp text to one asking about her and her family and if she knew about the other. And it did come up in our next conversations. And I was explaining the concept of a safe room and the whole concept of zoning and where buildings have safe rooms and where they don't. But to get back to learning English I suggest to them that they even go to children's cartoons on Netflix, which are in English, and it's slow and it's easy and it's multiple, not too much vocabulary. And then as they improve children's movies and then young adult things, I've read books with them in English that I find online that I can share on my screen. And I always start with a young adult book of some sort or another. I ask them their interest. One likes detective murder mysteries. The other one likes more well, not interesting. I guess more ways of helping people kinds of stories and growth in families and growth in children. And I find those books in every session we read and we talk about, but only in English. And I have also found on YouTube, there are many websites that have all kinds of lessons. And I found many of them with how to think in English. And we talk about that and how basically the practice is the more you speak in English, the more often you speak in English, the more comfortable it becomes. And having the Hebrew subtitles is basically a crutch. I find that for myself. And when I watch a foreign movie, I can't handle the subtitles. I think somebody mentioned it before. I find it distracting on the bottom. So if I don't understand the foreign language, I just take my time with it or just go with body action. So I think no subtitles, but starting with it's depending on the level of your student, the level that they are comfortable with at the beginning. There's also, I always suggest using USA Today's website. It's geared, it's an American newspaper, or the Jerusalem Post. They're both fairly low level English papers. And I find articles that I think might be interesting, and we read through them and discuss them and analyze the vocabulary and make lists of vocabulary. So those are all suggestions. One other point, I made my first trip to Israel 3 weeks ago. Actually, we left on April 21st and came back on May 5th. And everybody said, "Are you still going? There's trouble there?" And I said, "I've wanted to do this for 55, 60 years. And every time I wanted to do this, there was trouble there. Well, this time I'm going." Well, it turned out we had absolutely no trouble. It was magnificent. It was wonderful. I got to see my 2 students in person, hug and kiss them, have lunch with them. And and then the week after we left, all of this business started. So
Thank you, Martha.
it was really frightening, I guess. I'm not being there, but the fact that it could have been, we only missed it by a little bit, for which
Yeah.
I am very lucky and blessed, but it really brought it out to the fore. So,
Thank you,
How
Martha.
wonderful that you were able to go.
yes.
I'm glad. I'm going to ask Larry next, and then Kira, and then Julian to speak. So Larry.
Okay, thank you. I actually have to run out in a minute. I'm sorry, but I'll be quick. So getting back to the question of subtitles, I don't think there's a clear answer. It depends on the person. I actually like watching movies in Hebrew, and I do have the closed captioning in English, but I listen to the Hebrew. And one of the problems in using closed captions, I do understand some of the Hebrew, and I notice the translation is inaccurate. They'll take a sentence and they'll turn it into an idiom, and
Very
there's no
good
word
point.
that's even comparable to what they're saying. So that's one problem. But having said that, I've worked with students in Israel, and I've met people in Israel, especially young people. And sometimes they speak English like Americans, and they didn't learn it. And I'll ask them, and they definitely didn't pick it up in school. And I ask them, "How do you speak English so well?" And they all say, "I watch American TV and movies, and some play video games." One student in particular, which was interesting, I thought he was British. And I asked him, "Where did you learn to speak English?" He says, "I play video games and the common language is English." Apparently it was British English. So I don't think there's a clear answer. I think it is certainly no loss to try the closed captioning. I enjoy it. And as far as some people say, "Well, I can't, it's distracting." To me, I watch a show, it's all in Hebrew, and I see the captions. And at the end of the show, I think, what language was I just watching? I think my Hebrew's better because I understood every word, because the captioning blends in with my hearing and I don't even realize what language I'm following in. So again, no clear answer, but that's just my opinion.
Point well taken. Thank you, Larry. And before I ask Kira to speak, Michelle put in the chat, she's often Michelle Gross, she's very tied to research and thoughtful research. And so Michelle put some thoughts on the chat, as well as a site that you could go to. So check that out. Kira, you're next.
So I'll give you a brief. This again is from my experiencing with media and other languages that I know sort of, is if there are English subtitles, no matter what my, intent is, to me, it'll just be like I heard it in English by the time I'm done. I think it's hard to disengage yourself from your dominant language if it's available. But one thing I don't think anyone's mentioned is watching it, if they watch English or American or English language media with English subtitles. And I found, like, if I'm watching an Israeli movie, even if I only have Hebrew subtitles, it's a big help and I could understand a lot more. And then I feel like I'm listening to it in Hebrew. And I just remember when we were in Israel once, the whole family, my kids were younger, watching SpongeBob. And, they dub it into Hebrew, but you can get the Hebrew captions. So things that we wouldn't pick up through audio, we could understand better if we could also read it as it went along. So that's something else, that if they just can't follow a movie in English, they should try, I think the next step should be to try English subtitles.
Very interesting. Thank you. Julian.
Kira, I was going to say exactly that. I watch a lot of movies in different languages. I speak French, and I know there was a comment on French films. I have to watch a French film with French subtitles, because especially when you're in character, and in France, the cigarette's dangling from the mouth all the time, it's hard to understand, even if you're fluent. So English with English subtitles, I think, is a really great idea. I do that with French and Spanish. The other suggestion I have is, if you like the movie or the show, watch it again, because that way you're not going to focus so much on what's happening. You already know, so you focus on the language. So I often watch something twice if I'm interested in the language.
Thank you. Well, as always, a very thoughtful number of contributions from this community. And I would say that, one of the things that we hear often from our students is that they don't have anyone with whom they're speaking English outside of maybe you. And so, any exposure that they can get in English through culture, through reading, through speaking, it all adds to absorbing the language, internalizing the language, and improving your ability then to improve in the language. So you guys, you are the platform, but there are so many other ways to access English. And maybe as you build this confidence of your student, they'll have more confidence to try things like watching TV with English subtitles or no subtitles, so that they're hearing the language. And Kira says, don't forget songs. And of course, music is a beautiful way to experience language as well. So that was a great discussion. And Michelle says, Vimeo, YouTube, there's an unlimited amount of opportunities. And I think that, we've heard feedback that people don't always feel confident or comfortable. So I think what you're giving them to practice and to focus on what they're interested in, but then encouragement to explore other avenues to access English is really, really important. So any other comments on this before I'm going to open it up to our community, and then I have a couple other questions to ask you later. Any other comments? Okay, so I would just like, if you could use the reaction, if anybody wanted to ask anything, there's 31 people on today, so I don't want to dominate. I wanted to hear if there's anything on your mind that you wanted to raise, and if not, I can keep raising things. There's Merle. Hi, Merle. You need to unmute.
Trying. Okay.
There
Hi.
you go.
I have not been assigned a student yet. I'm wondering how many are in my
Good. Good. And I meant to mention this, so thank you. So we had a bit of a pause, unplanned pause, where our biggest partner, Tech Career, had changed in some of their schedules. Minna is actively interviewing right now a group, I think, of 24 women that are coming through Tech Career, and then we have another group coming after that. So my expectation is that those of you who have been patiently waiting for a student will soon be matched. And so we will continue to recruit, because we have a few more groups coming down the pipeline, but appreciate your patience, Merle. I think it should be soon now. That answers your question. And I actually meant to bring that up because many of you have been waiting for longer than we expected. So thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to raise something else, and then maybe that'll stimulate one of you to say, oh yeah, I meant to ask about that. The next question that came up that I felt like, I don't have as much experience with this as others, is a couple of our students have been helping their students with making presentations and giving presentations. And some of you who are, not teachers have thought, like, how do I do that effectively? What's the best way to help prepare a student? I didn't get a lot of background information, but I'm just wondering if those of you who've done that kind of thing with your student, if you have suggestions to make or resources to point us to that might be useful. Anybody have any thoughts on helping a student make presentations in English? Where am I? Oh, there's Joe Reiser. Joe, just unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted. My student needed to make a presentation in English and asked me. We actually had a couple of extra sessions in order for me to help him with that. But the thing that I was most concerned about, and what I kept saying to him was, you need to be sure that the English you use is English with which you're comfortable, because he would ask for different kinds of words. What other word can I use for this? What can I use for that? And I said, some of the things that I'm saying to you are not necessarily words that you would be expected to know or that your audience might know. So I kept trying to keep him on track in terms of sounding good, but not sort of out of his league, so that they knew that he was getting help with his presentation. So, and then he practiced. I would ask him to speak to me, and I'd correct his pronunciation or help him with phraseology or something. But and he did well, fortunately.
Sure. And that's a really good point, because we can provide information to somebody that may not be something they can internalize and then utilize. So I think that's a really wise thought. Martha, you have to unmute.
I've been working with this young woman who, when I first started with her, was an employee of Tech Career. She wasn't a student. She was what was known as a program coordinator, and she helped the students do their thing. Well, the reason she chose this program in particular was because she wanted a newer, better job, and in the high-tech industries. And she had experience. She had a bachelor's and a master's, had done her military service, and she was very qualified. And verbally in English, really very understandable, but it was the reading and the writing that was the most difficult. In order to apply for jobs in other companies rather, she needed to have applications And well, first we did the resume, and what seemed to work best for her, and it has continued since she actually has gotten a new job and has to do things in English, is actually something that I've tried to counsel her forward, but she's reluctant because she's comfortable in this process. She writes at first whatever it is in Hebrew, and then she Google translates, which, as we all know, doesn't do a real bang up job sometimes. So what I suggested then is that she send me the copy of what Google translated her words to be. And I enlarge it and print it and take my red ancient teacher pen and make suggestions for vocabulary and phraseology and sentence structure. And there really isn't all that much, but it's enough so that it makes it, I don't put my words in there and I don't change her intent as best I can. But sometimes there are mistakes, and I send it back to her, and then we orally practice it. When she was applying for jobs, we did mock interviews several times over with different kinds of company issues, and she applied for 3 or 4 different positions in big companies, and they all had an English proficiency test that she was required to take. And she failed the first 2 and therefore was rejected. But we kept practicing and we kept working, and she finally got a job with what used to be called Facebook and now is Meta. And works in Tel Aviv. On pandemic, she works at home in Rehovot, but they have had a couple of, she's in the what I would call human resources department. She arranges interviews and the company language, no matter where, they have people all over the world. And whether she's talking to Hong Kong or Dublin or the United States or somewhere else, it's all in English. So she gets frightened when she has to do that and is comfortable doing that same process over again. She's getting better at it and more confident with it. And when I saw her in person a couple of weeks ago, we spoke clearly in English at the time we spent together. And I said, 3 years ago, you weren't this comfortable. And she said, absolutely not. She said, this has made the difference.
Fantastic.
So, that's the process we go through.
Thank you, Martha. I'm going to ask Doris to speak, and then I actually have a comment also that I want to add. So Doris, go ahead. Unmute.
I can do this. Yeah, so I've hesitated on this because I'm feeling rather incompetent. I hear the other tutors, we've been together 3 years. We talk an hour and a half. Somebody else I talked to said, my student wants to meet 3 days a week. And I'm struggling to get through the 30, 35-minute mark. And I'm just, I just don't know if it's me. I mean, we've done some fun things. We pulled up a recipe for shakshuka, and we went through the measurements and the ingredients, and we talked about food, and it morphed into favorite foods and allergies. But at the end of 30 minutes, I was just struggling. So
maybe some suggestions from our community, and there's also all kinds of individuals out there. So I would not absorb that you're not doing right by her, because what you're saying sounds really very common and right and appropriate and all those things. But maybe we can get some suggestions. Michelle's got her hand up for helping you engage her, and she may be really shy and uncomfortable. So
yeah, my big fear here is that I'm cheating her. I know there's a waiting list, and she waited and tried to get in here, and then she got stuck with me.
Oh my goodness, don't say that. Before I have Michelle, Dr. Off speak about Doris's thought, I just want to close the conversation on presentations with one comment, if that's okay. And then I really appreciate Doris bringing up her challenge and letting us think with her. One of the tutors wrote me recently that her student was meeting with members of the Miami Federation who were visiting tech career, and they knew they were going to be doing that in advance, so the tutor was helping her prepare for that meeting. And one of the things that they did, and I don't know if anybody mentioned it, was, you make a presentation, then there are often questions that come in after you say something, based on what you said or based on what the topic of the meeting is. And so in addition to just helping with building comfort with speaking about what she was asked to speak about in terms of presentation, the tutor also worked with her student on what kind of questions might people ask as a result of this presentation and how might you answer them. And so that was like, that's part of the presentation process, but not necessarily part of the formal frontal presentation, whether you're in person or on Zoom or using a PowerPoint. So just another thing to think about as you're asking your student, if they've asked you for this kind of help, of how to think through the whole process, making sure that they understand what they're being asked to present and why, and then who that audience is, so that you can help maybe guide them in terms of preparation. So let's think about what Dora said, because I feel your frustration, and I want to think, and we can talk offline too, but I want to give you the benefit of the very, very wise people who are on this call. So first Michelle Doctoroff, and then Julian. And then go ahead, Michelle Doctoroff.
So to answer Doris, I feel like I'm the same person like you. I'm not an ESL teacher. I don't have magical resources or anything special. And I've been with my student, I'm just looking, 86 times we've met. So what I do is sort of usually like all week, I think in the back of my head, if I see something that might be good for my student, then I'll, put it, I have like a little computer file that I put all the resources in, so I can always go back to them. So it could be, I use a lot of like comics, like, I read a paper newspaper every day, and there's like comics with play on words and stuff like that. So playfully I say, oh, maybe I'm going to stump you on this one. And my student has a pretty high level of English. Usually I don't stump her on anything. So, but it's a good, I always say, like, if you understand the humor, you've got something going for you. So that's one. There's tons of resources on Skilled Volunteers for Israel. So I look there. Sometimes I pull things off of Facebook, little poems or anything like that people are posting. And what I do is, so when I get ready for my session, we start off and how are you and what happened in your week, following up if she was telling me a story. So that could be 5 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, I never know. And then I always have, this is my little book. And every week I over plan. So I'll plan 3 different things. We're going to look at these comics. We're going to listen to this YouTube. We're going to do this crossword puzzle. So I over plan, and then I kind of make it like a little game show. Okay, so do you want to do A, this activity, B, this activity, or C, this activity? And then sometimes we get through 1, and then I've got 2 for the next week. So I think the thing is over plan, and then you can fill up your time. So
thanks,
that
Michelle.
works for me.
Thanks, Michelle. Julian.
I just want to make a couple of comments. Doris, when it's not your native language, 30 minutes one-on-one is actually pretty good. So I think, especially if they're a little shy or hesitant, or they're not confident in their conversational skills. So I think 30 minutes is actually more than you give yourself credit for. I have my students, I have 2, one who's very fluent in English, the other one who is reasonable and he's getting better. Have them read the Jerusalem Post. If you can get that together, and have them read an article. First of all, improves their reading skills. There are a lot of good words, of course, in newspapers, but you can discuss it, discuss the topic, whether it's on food, whether it's on politics or history, whatever it is. So that's a good basis for conversation, is having them read a newspaper.
Thank you, Julie. And then Betty Ann says, ask the student to be the audience. What is annoying when you're listening to a presentation? Oh, this is about presentations. Can you always hear? So that was on the other topic, but good advice. Thanks. And anybody else? Because I do agree that 30 minutes for some people speaking another language is exhausting. And so it may be that that's as much as she can cope with. And maybe over time it will grow a little bit longer as she gets more confident or comfortable with the process. So
Thank you, everybody.
But
Thank
I
you.
think also structuring, like we've heard many times from this group of tutors, sort of also thinking about your time together in some segments. So you might have how was your week segment? What did you do? Bring up something you talked about the previous week, and then have something new to share. And then, maybe end with something fun, like whether it's a comic, like Michelle said, or a short video from the Voice of America on idioms, or I know how Arnie's used crossword puzzles, or just some kind of very fun, short activity to sort of close it. And it's good also to ask her the question, and maybe she's really shy, like, is there something that you wanted to do or learn that I didn't cover today, or that you want me to work on for next week, so that you can put some of the responsibility on her as well. Because I feel like you're taking on a lot of the responsibility, and she also can be thinking about what she wants to get out of the sessions, and less about the time, if 30 minutes is what she can do right now.
Marla?
Yeah.
Michelle Gross here. When I had my student, we had an issue because she didn't have much oral English, and it took me a while to realize that.
Okay. So she made
what we
good
did,
comprehension, but not as good speaking skills. Is that what you're saying?
right,
Michelle?
right. We, you and I spoke at the time, and you told me she had actually qualified for a different program, not the one-on-one, but she insisted on the one-on-one. So I asked her permission, and instead of conversation, we read dialogues together. I found dialogues that were Hebrew with an English translation, and that's what we did. And it seemed to work for her. It helped her gain confidence. And the dialogues were pretty simple dialogues about going to the store or doing homework, but it got her used to speaking English, and it was very structured.
Also, very good suggestion, Michelle. Thank you. And if Doris, if you want some access to some of those kind of things, let us know. I'll connect you with Michelle, right? That'd be great. Denise Walpert, you've been patiently waiting. Please.
No, I just did a fun activity with my student last week. Oh no, the week before. I brought the lyrics of a Bruno Mars song. And we looked at, sentence construction and vocabulary and language, because lyrics in a song don't necessarily follow the English languages if you were writing an essay. So it was fun, and she really, really enjoyed that. I said, where does the sentence end? Where would we put a period here? And so she really enjoyed it, and it was just a fun activity.
Okay, that's always good. And music and poetry and literature, they're always it's a different kind of English, and it opens the heart and mind, I think, to a different experience, and connects maybe to things that are speaking emotionally to the students. So I like that suggestion a lot. Karen, Nathan.
This follows the last comment a little bit. I had a conversation with my student about his hair because he was talking about needing a haircut, and he kind of has dreadlocks. So we started talking about his dreads, and then that led to a conversation about liking Bob Marley which led to me learning about Rasta and Rastafarians. And so for the next lesson, and then he explained the whole Rastafarian philosophy and what's behind that, and how he wants to embody that a little more in his life, which led me to learn more about Bob Marley. And so for the next lesson, the following week, I had sent him the song Buffalo Soldiers by Bob Marley, which then led us to a conversation about racism and how the song Buffalo Soldiers, had different meanings for different people. But it also allowed him to talk about some of his experiences as an Ethiopian, and he is very dark complected, and so some of his experiences about racism. So it was kind of a domino effect in terms of an ongoing conversation that I hadn't planned. That all started out with him talking about needing a haircut. So.
Fantastic. And I just point people back to the chat. Michelle Gross put a link to those dialogues in the chat, which I've captured and will also send back out. And then Barbara Lettuce reminded us that Noah Corral just won 3rd place on the Eurovision. And she got to talk to her student about that. And for those of you who have never experienced the Eurovision, it's a lot of fun. And it's worth learning about, and it's always very, very good for conversation, especially with Israelis. So there's some great movies about the Eurovision out there as well. Myra, I've seen you have your hand up. You have to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I came in late, but I tutor at 2 o'clock, so you changed the time, so I came in late.
I apologize.
That's okay. 2 things I used recently that I thought were magnificent. Always find these on YouTube. There's the basketball player, Omri Caspi. He played in America, in California for a while. He made a magnificent video called Israel at 75. He speaks about faith, how faith in Israel has propelled them to do all the amazing miracles that we know about. But it's magnificent pictures, magnificent video that really tells the whole story of Israel. It's only about 3 minutes long. He's speaking in English, but the English is also along the bottom. The students have loved it. I've loved it. I sent it to so many people. That's one thing that is really beautiful. The other one I use for Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Maccabees have a song called Megillat Ha'atzmaut. They're singing in Hebrew, but the English translation is along the bottom. So I would suggest that is a great thing to use with your students. Both of them are so beautiful. That's my suggestion for today. I love the Omri Caspi one. You have to see it.
Okay.
Myra, can you get it? Can you get it to us?
Go on YouTube.
I'll get it out. I'll get it out, Harvey.
Oh, okay.
If I need to help, Myra, I'll ask you, but I'll get it out to everyone.
Okay, it's great.
I just got it. Give me half a second and I'll post it.
Okay, there's Michelle. Always. Always. Michelle's posting it, and she's posting it in our chat, and I will also grab it and send it back out.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. And Julie Cohn, you have your hand up. Please join the conversation.
Yeah, so I feel like my situation is a little bit unique because my student is pretty advanced and we're also close in age. So already it's sort of easier for us to connect. And we really don't have issues with time. But one thing that I've tried with him, and Marla, I'm sorry I haven't followed up on this, but I emailed you about this. We've played some games together, like there are board games that you can find online. We're also doing a tabletop role-playing game, which is pretty involved and I wouldn't recommend for everybody. But I think it's good to think of something that will definitely take up a lot of time and then you can also, it takes extra time to like read through the rules with somebody who's not a native English speaker. So even that will like take up a chunk of time, and then playing the game. And like, even if you know, make mistakes while you're playing the game, my student and I played the game Code Names, and like we lost twice just because we sort of misunderstood each other, but it was funny. Like nobody was upset about it. We had a good time, and eventually we won the game, and it was great. But that's definitely something that you could try, especially with more advanced students.
That's great. And yeah, Julie and I started a conversation, and it sort of needs to be returned to. So maybe we'll get some suggestions of online games. That's a really fun idea. My family loves to play Code Names. It's really hard. So maybe that game and some other suggestions as well. So we're almost at the end of our time. I know Martha has a comment, and I just wanted to see, is there anybody else who wanted to say anything before we say goodbye together? And I will follow up, as I always do, with one of my emails, and then I'll put some of these really great ideas into a blog post so that you can find it easily on the website. And as always, it's a real joy for me to learn from you. So thanks for all the input that everybody provided today. And I hope that Doris feels a little bit empowered, and feel free to reach out to me. And Martha, we have 1 minute, so.
Okay, I'll make it really quick.
Yeah.
I mentioned before that I read books with my students, and one of the first books that I read with the first student, and I've duplicated several times later, is called A Long Walk to Water. And it's by Linda Sue Park. And it's based on the true story of a young man who was one of the lost Sudanese boys, and who walked across the desert through Ethiopia, was then rescued and sent to the United States, and made a life for himself. It's a long story, but they all identified with this young man based on their own family history. So it's a right at the right level, not early beginning, but I'd say mid cycle for. And what I do with reading a book is they read a paragraph, I read a paragraph, or as we get on, we take turns and pages, and then we discuss and talk about different vocabulary.
Finding this book online, Martha?
Yes.
Can you send me the link, and I'll get it up?
Yeah, I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay, fantastic. Because I think the subject matter is really relevant, like you said.
Right,
and
exactly.
it's a resource, even if it's not, you don't read the whole book, you could get that student interested in that story, and maybe they would finish it if you don't do it together.
I found that I do the chit chat stuff first. What was your week like? And then I usually do a lesson of some grammatical something, usually with a YouTube video or a someplace else video, and then we read. And while we read, we talk, and that uses up at least an hour, sometimes more.
Okay. Well, everyone, it's been an hour, and I thank you all. I wish everybody well. Debbie and Harvey, thank you for sharing your personal experiences with what's going on in Israel. It's really important to get close to that way, and to feel what our students are experiencing. So thank you again, and everyone be well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marla.
Really great conversation. Appreciate it.